Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing Content Extravaganza. And if you've spent a second here, you will know that I'm on a mission to give you everything you need to be successful in your business, providing that is what you need to be successful in your business is to know more about sales and marketing and be motivated to do sales and marketing better in your business. So what we do is we review the very best marketing content and the very worst marketing content on the internet. We bring you the marketing news, and I bring in anyone I can find with experience relevant to the success of your business to extract that experience from them and give it to you, all with a view to making you much more successful in your business. I don't think that's the best way I've ever done that. But today is Talk Marketing, and we have a guest for you. So today's guest started work way back in 1986 in a bank. Since then, he has sold advertising, directed tours, but mainly he has been involved in talent development for businesses including Travel Corp, Contiki Holidays and Groupon. He has been running his business, Glo International, for almost 20 years. He is the author of Ignite Your Potential, two books. I'll put my teeth in and I'll try again. 2 books, Ignite Your Potential and Add Value. He is a keynote speaker, Master of Ceremonies, has 26 years learning and development experience, and presented his brilliant presentation, Pause and Effect, for TEDx. Today's guest has the weirdest accent I've heard in 20 years. You can let us know in the comments where on earth you think he got that from. And he really likes mangoes. So today's guest is Mark Carter. Good morning, Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Martin. That was a great intro, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, I've taken a bit of a pause on these, and I haven't done it for a while. I'm not flowing quite the way I would like to. And it's quite early in the morning here. And there we go. You know, I do my best.
It's good. I love the rawness, the authenticity. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, if it's anything, it's raw, for sure. In fact, maybe that should be our tagline. If it's anything, it's raw, for sure. To tell us about the mangoes thing, you can also tell us about the riding where did you ride a Vespa wearing a kilt? Oh, that's going to give it away about that accent.
You know, I love mangoes, and it's just when, as part of my intro, it's fascinating. We go, well, all these places. So I was born in England, raised in Scotland, nurtured in Europe, several round world trips, 20 years in Australia, and people try and pick my accent. So we kind of give them that context so they get the accent. And then we always finish it off with a pun of, because I live here now, because mangoes don't grow in Edinburgh, which they don't, right? So this is one good reason to live in Australia, is it not?
But supply chains are such that I'm sure you can acquire mangoes in Edinburgh.
You can, but that's a bit like, you know, living by the sea and having fish straight out of the sea fresh on your plate than having it shipped and imported and exported. It's not the same, right? So it's just quite nice being here closest to source, I think.
Yes,
and
yes.
The other, you asked about the kilt as well. I thought I'd answer that quick. So when I was working with Contiki in Europe, I once drove around Florence on a Vespa in my kilt, and I was getting a whole load of applause and stuff. I think there was a World Cup and soccer going on at the time, so it was a bit breezy, it was a bit drafty, but it was fun.
Was it not a bit indecent also? Is there not a danger that you might expose more than people might want to see?
No, that's what the sporran works really well, to weight everything and keep it down.
To weight it. Is that why the sporran is there?
I'm not sure if that. No, it's not the only reason, but it definitely helps with that. You know,
it definitely helps.
And I've actually started wearing it for one of my keynotes. Actually, I've got a signature keynote on culture, and the way I tackle the subject of culture is we've got to go back to where the word comes from in a tribal, ethnological sense. And I open the keynote with a live djembe drum. I close the keynote with a live djembe drum, and it makes sense to deliver that sometimes in my kilt and in my attire. So I wear the kilt, you know, even on stage for keynotes and stuff sometimes these days as well, which is kind of cool.
Cool. I had no idea you also had a culture thing. I have to tell you, Mark, I'm a little bit in love with what you do, man. What you do is really so good. It's so good. I tell you who I really like is Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've indulged in any Malcolm Gladwell. I like what he does is he takes kind of the situation and he kind of transposes it into an actual reality. Do you know what I mean? It's like we think this and this is actually the case. And I would put you in that category. I think you're kind of on that mission, because what we're going to talk about today, I think, is this value thing that you did. You wrote the book, Add Value. And this is something that I've told people, I'm not joking, for 20 years. Like, it's not about price, it's about value. But then I always kind of fudged what the value is because, I mean, as we talk to you about it, we'll come to understand what it is. Because thankfully you haven't fudged it, you've done the work. So, because it's value is in the eye of the beholder. That's kind of what I've always told people, and let's leave it at that. But yeah, the way you've come at this is actually much more interesting and useful to actually break it down and understand what value is. So yeah, I love what you're doing, man. I just watched your TEDx this morning. That's a great title for a talk, by the way. Pause and effect, about how teddy bears can communicate value. So that's good. So let's bring some structure to this because, we need structure. So, there are only 5 questions, but you've forgotten what the questions are. So I'll remind you.
Exactly.
So question number 1, how are you qualified to talk to us? I mean, are we talking about value today? Is that what you want to talk about? Because it's what I really want to talk about.
Absolutely happy to talk about that today, for sure. Okay. So question 1, am I qualified? Let me go through.
Whoa. I'm going to give you all the questions because we need this structure when we present this stuff as well, So I'll give you all the questions and then I'll give you the questions one by one. How are you qualified to talk to us about value? Who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? That's always the question, actually. How do people add value to people's lives? So, I am interested in value. The third question, what is your recommendation for people who want to get better at adding value? Question number 4, what should people read? Question number 5, who can you throw under the bus who might endure or maybe even enjoy to have a conversation like this with me? So those are the 5 questions. So we'll start at the very beginning. How are you, Mark Carter, qualified to talk to us about value?
I love that. It's a great question. I think I would start by saying I serendipitously found my spot and place by my boss in Contiki putting me in role of a training manager in Europe. And yet 26 years later, I find myself still in this field. And I think I would say the cut through I've got over more than 2 decades on projects I've delivered kind of gives me confidence and comfortability in the message that I've got to share, I guess. It's and the proof's in the pudding, I guess. All the programs I've delivered over many years seem to make transformational change with people. There's clients I work with that have worked with me for 2 decades and never had the same content twice, So I think it's more than 2 decades experience is what I bring to that mix. And I don't doubt there's other people as qualified, more qualified, but I'm comfortable in the message that I bring. Does that help answer that to some degree?
A little bit, yeah, but you're not going to, we need more. So what kind of projects then have you been involved in, and how is that specific? How has that specifically led you to talking about value, thinking about writing a book about and talking about value?
Yeah, perfect. I love that we do these drilling questions, by the way, because that's where we go to. So I was coaching, I've worked with corporates as a consultant capacity for in Australia for close to 2 decades. And that included consulting and coaching heavily sales businesses, sales leaders, sales teams to build them out and buffer them out. And the way that the value piece came around, and it's actually prefaced in the TED Talk and certainly in the book, as a training manager, I look for every creative tool I can think of to arm teams to help them grow and get the outcomes they're looking for. And I started asking this question of managers, sales managers, going, define value for me. And the reason I started asking for it is because I wanted to understand how they were positioning it with their teams so that I could maybe think of ways to help them see it differently. But it was the answers to that question that sent me down the rabbit hole of going, wow, this is a really interesting subject and one I need to do more work on. Because it amazed me how many leaders and people in business, when asked to define the word value, many of them couldn't even give me a definition. They literally paused. They went, some of them would say, I've never thought about it. Now hit pause for a second there. Think about that. If you're in business, selling any service or doing anything, adding value is kind of critical for somebody wanting to buy your product or service, right? So if you can't even define the very thing you're trying to prove, how are you going to prove that you're adding it in the first place? That's what caught my attention. And that's what made me want to keep asking this question. And by asking the question of tens, hundreds, thousands of people across multiple businesses, it became super clear to me that, as you described, Martin, when you said you kind of fudged and you hacked through, there is this perception of value. However, this perception of value is linked to the layers of human behavior. So when you talk about credibility, again, if there's one field that I often say is my specialty, it's actually people and behavior. Learned from, I talk about Contiki environment. 10 years working with Contiki on tool groups was like a 13-meter long experiment, petri dish into human behavior. I observed everything. I took it all in. And when I later went and did accreditations and all the common profiling tools like DISC, Myers-Briggs, EQ, all these tools, that gave me frameworks of language around tools I'd already identified. Now, if I bring that back into the value piece, asking that question of value, people, when drilling in and saying, define it, it became clear they started to define value one of several ways based on what? Based on their perceptions of how they function, their brain science, their preferences, how they take in information, how they make decisions. And that's what gave me this kind of energy and impetus to keep going down that rabbit hole. And that's why I landed up ultimately with this 5-element model of value that is a workable model, as you kind of described. You said it's kind of not fudging. It gives a more workable model that's very practical that you can bring into businesses. And so for the last 2 decades, pretty much close to 2 decades, I've been implementing value when I do custom sales methodology builds. So I bespoke end-to-end sales capabilities for blue chip organizations with billion-dollar sales revenues, right down to SMEs. So that's a credibility piece as well, literally building those frameworks of which value is a part.
Super cool. Right. So I think, here's what I think, is that you're 100% right. I think you're 100% right, and I'm going to take it to 200% right, I think. So I think what goes on 100% in sales and marketing is that you need to be adding value. If you're not adding value, you'll get found out pretty quickly. Do you know what I mean? And so most businesses must be adding value because they continue to be in business. So that's one thing that I want to say. Where it goes to 200% is that I think the process of being in business is a value exchange. You extract value from the market in terms of money, sales, share values, etc., by delivering value to the market. So I think this value is the cornerstone of like being in business. I think everything in business is sales and marketing is what I think. But this value exchange is what business is. That's 100% what it is, which exacerbates the problem that nobody knows what value is. But that's also consistent with almost everything. I've told you about my What The series. Where's that Good Light? Because it seems like everything that goes on in sales and marketing is incredibly poorly defined. Like there are 6,000 people a month search for the phrase, what is marketing? How can people not know what marketing is? Sales, what is sales? What is a lead? What is all of this stuff? People don't really know. So this is consistent with that. Apart from this, I think, is the very foundation. Value is the very foundation of how you get to be in business. You extract value from the market by delivering value to the market. There was something else that I wanted to say that you've said already, that you alluded to, but I should have written it down, but I didn't. So what is value then? That's because people can't define it. You've written a book, so you must be able to define it for us.
I'll give you a framework that I work with. So something you just said there about the search term for marketing, that makes sense too, because marketing is a massive field, right? And then within that, you have context of specialization. So you might have digital marketing. You might have live event marketing. You've got SEO. And I'm not a marketing specialist, but think about value the same way, because I work with value the same way with businesses. The value model, and I'll explain that model for you now, is an overarching framework. And then we can drill into that to such things as defining your value proposition. And actually, I do recent bodies of work, one of which was helping a business redefine their vision, mission, and values. And I highlight the fact that and you look at vision statements, you look at mission statements, what's common to see are 3 of the 5 value elements that I'm going to explain in a minute. They're pretty much 3 of the 5 value elements are included within any good vision or mission statement. So these 5 overarching elements of value is the overarching framework. And then there's many little tentacles like an octopus that come off from that we can add additional context, such as value propositions, such as value and service offerings. A toolkit I talk about, VAEs, being value added extras that have got nothing to do with your business product or service, but everything to do with the manner with which you deliver it and create experiences, right? So value, here's my framework, what I've learned to identify is, and it's very Aristotelian. I've identified 5 elements of value, and I talk about the model because if I say earth, water, air, and ask you for the next element, what would you say? Earth, water, air, and?
Is it fire?
There you go. I love that. You got it. And you
I was shitting myself. I thought I might not know the answer.
And when I do that live, you get an audience saying fire. Now, everybody knows these. They come from the 4th century, Empedocles. Aristotle confirmed and said, yeah, these coexist. And to prove it, he burnt a log. I often say, like, the smoke rises the air, the water bubbling out is water, the liquid bubbling out is water, charcoal falling is earth, the flames the fire. But he added the 5th element, the ether, for all the other worldly movements. Now, I say that because the 5 elements of value I've identified tie into these fundamental elements. So here they are. Tangible value. That is the value language of business, is the way I've written it in the book. Why? Because it's measurable. It's practical. It's every report, profit and loss spreadsheet, data that you're looking at. And it's dollars, percentages, numbers, and time. Now, as a learning professional, I also know nursery rhymes help anchor things. So I built my value model as the 5 elements in a nursery rhyme. So tangible value is like the element of earth because it's very grounded. Dollars, percentages, numbers, and time is the tangible value nursery rhyme. But the metrics that matter are yours and not mine. I don't need to assume. You got that?
I've got that. And I'm just wondering how we're going to do. Are you going to give us all 5?
I will give you all 5.
Okay, you give us all 5, like, quickly, because I've got like a river of questions, a tsunami of questions on each of these.
Perfect.
Okay.
Second element, water is the universal symbol of emotional states. Water is emotional value. We do a majority of our decision making at a subconscious or emotional level. Daniel Kahneman got a Nobel Prize for part of his work is on that field, right? So stories, senses, personal and unique, like wow. If you want to add emotional value, these are the 4 ways how. And then you add a touch of creativity for an extra rao. So that's emotional value. It's a very different way than building the practical, pragmatic stuff. Service value is the 3rd element, and that's like the element of air, because great service is delivered like an airborne Alexa, person to person. Muhammad Ali said it well. Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. So service to others is a rent we all pay. Focus on solutions and possibilities, others and the environment every day. The trick is to not let short-term thinking or profits get in the way. 4th element, fire. My favorite TED talk is by Robert Waldinger, director of the longest study of adult human development that's been going 80 years. John F. Kennedy was in that initial cohort. And as cliche as it seems, it turns out that what's the answer to fulfilling healthy life? Love and quality relationships. So relationship value is like the element of fire because quality relationships is the warmth in our world. So for relationship 8 traits, choose your own if you must, but be candid and brave with 2 common languages, kindness and love, because quality character and value fits together like 2 hands in gloves. So that's the element of fire. The fifth element, the ether, the magical element that Aristotle alluded to. And if you're a movie buff, I talk about this. It's like the movie, The Fifth Element. Mila Jovovich was the fifth element in that movie. We are each the fifth element, because the fifth element, we're the magical element. We are the ether. We bring personal value, and we do that based on our natural perceptions, our natural strengths, our natural gifts. So how, why, do, and who are the four layers making the total sum of you. And somewhere in that mix lives your values and your perception and ability to add value. That's the five elements. That's the value model as an overarching theme.
And this is your model, is it?
Yes. Yes.
You are a genius, brother. You are an absolute genius.
I don't know about that. I think, when you said about earlier, and I appreciate the compliment, I really do. When you're talking about Gladwell, I think what I get and what I've learned about myself is I know I'm a storyteller, and I know how to pull the right stories or pull great examples and try and contextualize it to help people see their world a bit differently. I think that's what I do, and that's what I've done in creating the model. I certainly wouldn't call myself a genius. I'm far from, but I think I can articulate a model that enlightens people. I like that you get something from that.
Yeah, no, 100%, because I think this is kind of also my mission. I see myself a little bit like the wizard in Toto, not the wizard. Like they go on this mission to get to Oz. Is that where they're going? The Wizard of Oz, yeah. And then they get there, and there's all this bluster going on, and then Toto pulls down the curtain, and it's just the geezer turning the wheel. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of how that is my brand idol, is Toto from The Wizard of Oz. I see myself as pulling down the curtain, and I think you're doing the same thing, and I think Malcolm Gladwell does the same thing. Yeah. But in terms of articulating this, like the model is genius, the articulation is genius. You can't call yourself a genius. I'm calling you a genius. Just accept it. Just accept it.
I'm going cool. Red, man.
But let's drill down a little bit, because I'm really interested in this. So starting with tangible, I think this is the definition. If you are blessed to find a definition, this is the one that you will find. This is the one that everyone kind of alludes to. But this, for me, is where it goes wrong. Because the tangible, like you say, is associated with the dollars, which makes everyone think that that value is just about the price. Or people think that to deliver value, you have to deliver something with a greater monetary value than they can realize for themselves, or they're prepared to realize for themselves. So this is the kind of definition that I think 95, well, no, not maybe, let's say, I'm making it up, 70% of the business world kind of alludes to and adheres to. Like, I can give you this thing and it will save you money, the service, the product, whatever it is. The issue for that is it goes to where it's completely wrong for me, where salespeople especially come to think that it's all about the price. It's because that's the most tangible thing, is the price. So it's all about that. So when people tell them it's too expensive, they put their tail between their legs and they run away. I don't know what the question is. Discuss.
Yeah, I got it, man. Listen, I agree. This is why that chapter in tangible value, I call it, literally, I labeled it the value language of business, because that's what it's become most associated with. People are thinking in the dollars and the measurable impact. Again, I'll give this quickly. I mean, this is where that perception. Yes, there are some people who have a heavier weighting on show me the dollars, show me the money, like the Jerry Maguire stuff. That's real, but it's not everybody. And as Aristotle pointed out, all these elements coexist in the burning log. Well, guess what? They coexist in people as well. Even the most logically driven people are still going to be having the other elements involved. So that's why I share the framework. And when I work with the model with businesses specifically, we're building out their value playbook. How are you filling the value buckets? How are you hitting all these elements and not just staying focused on one? And to your point, I would agree that in a business sense, the default fallback one is tangible value, dollars, numbers, time, that value proposition. It's important, but it's not everything. And, and in sales as well, salespeople, like this is where behavioral science comes in. When I train salespeople, there isn't like there's one successful salesperson. If I simplify it, you can relate this to the kind of profiling of 4 types. You've got people that will be very successful in sales, lots of big activity, give them a sniff of an opportunity, they'll close it, but their paperwork and error rate is through the roof because they're big picture and they're not in the detail. Conversely, you've got salespeople that super professional, super polished, but a bit cold. Their clients might not love them, but geez, their clients really respect and they're very confident they follow that lead. You got salespeople who might not have as much activity, but their detail and attention to detail and proof of ROI is so strong and solid, you can't argue with them. And so they might close less, not the big ones, but they close solid and have less fallout. And then you've got some people that people will buy from them because they love the person more than they love the product, right? People buy both the product or service and the person. And you've got those people that just have a really beautiful ambient relationship with their clients that people buy from. So in the same way, and these types of people are going to leverage, maybe have a bias around facets of value, your clients will too. So my default is have a greater awareness of all 5 elements. Don't get fixated on one, and especially not, to your point, price alone. And price and value are 2 different things altogether. Value, focus on value, not price. Bring it back to value, not price.
Okay, so 100%. We are going to fixate on these one at a time. I see how they go together, and we will segue to that. But it's too interesting, man. I'm interested in these things. So 100%, this is where bad salespeople go really wrong because they think it's all about the price. And for me, it's got nothing to do with the price. It's everything to do with the value. And your nursery rhyme is, how does it end? It's the perception
how, why, how, why, do, and who are the 4 layers making the total sum of you. And somewhere in that mix lives your perceptions of values and value. So it's your perceptions are in that one for sure. It's you.
No. So the first one, the first nursery rhyme is?
Dollars, percentages, numbers, and time. That one?
Yes.
Yeah. Dollars, percentages, numbers, and time is the tangible value nursery rhyme. But the metrics that matter are yours and not mine. And that's to remind me that I've got to ask you better questions to understand the measurable impact you want to see and not assume what I think it is.
More than that, value is entirely subjective. Subjective. So if you've never bought, even if you have bought the thing, if you've only ever sold the thing, then you can have no idea what the actual value of that thing is. Unless you ask your customers what the value is, you will never know. You will never know because it is entirely subjective. And they all might have taken different value from it. But I think the job of a salesperson, if they want to be effective, if they want to be successful, is to understand all of those value components so that they can then allude to them. So this is where it comes to like the value proposition. So businesses that I've worked for, I'm sure you've worked with businesses who sit around in meetings for weeks and months trying to work out what their value proposition is, instead of just picking up the phone and asking someone who knows what it is, which is their customer who bought the thing and continues to buy the thing. This is the insanity of it, you know?
I would say I often, when I do sales training, I even extrapolate this to leadership too. If there was one skill you learn in sales, if I could only train one skill, it'd be the skill to ask better strategic questions and be genuinely interested in the answers. Because 100%. If you ask questions and listen, people are going to tell you all their clues of what is important and what's valuable to them. And that shows itself in many ways through all this. But if you ask the right questions and genuinely listen and go deeper, you will start to unravel that individual's perception of value. And then you can add and weight more of the value elements accordingly. But I agree 100%. It's subjective. Ask the questions, you get to understand that person's viewpoint.
And you have to understand that person's viewpoint because they're going to buy it if they see value in it. You know, you can tell them till you're blue in the face. If you're not lucky enough to hit on the thing that they really need, they're not going to buy it. So 100%, I think that.
There's something. Sorry, there's one thing you said I want to anchor. That value proposition is true. I agree. Phone to clients, ask other people. But also from a go-to-market, if you think and you make this practical in marketing, on some level, even your initial contacts to market, you've still got to somehow articulate value of what it is that you do as a general, even before, because you're not talking one-on-one. I'm not having a one-on-one conversation with you necessarily. I'm having a conversation with a million potential clients. So you do need to articulate to some degree what your overarching value proposition is. And that's why you can drill into value and some ideas you can work with. And to my point, though, I said at a top level, when you're communicating to market, you definitely want to try and incorporate tangible, emotional, and service value elements at that level of go-to-market.
Okay.
Tangible, emotional, and service.
Okay, cool. And I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. I mean, I don't. But for the purposes of this conversation, I kind of do. The thing is, you can, like, when you're marketing, like when I was a sales, like when I'm marketing, typically what I do is I say, you know, I help people like you. And that might be enough to get them into a conversation. Then the conversation becomes, how do I help people like you? Do you know? I mean, it's not as base as that, but it can be. Like when you're communicating to the market, it can be as base as that. And then I think the job of the salesperson is to get one-to-one and find out exactly what the value is that they need, you know. So that's good. So let's leave that there. And let's go to, so you're saying dollars, percentages, time.
Numbers and time. Yeah.
Numbers
dollars,
and time.
Time.
And it will depend a little bit on the type of person that you are talking to. So a manager or even a senior manager in a corporation is going to be schooled in that, you know, they will have their numbers. It's all about their numbers. You know, if you can help them to deliver their numbers, then that's going to work. So I think that will work there. Emotional. I think buying stuff is hugely emotional. I think it really is. And I feel like it feels like the machine has learned that unhappy people spend more money. Do you know what I mean? So like driving people emotionally to make them unhappy is good for consumerism. Let's put it that way. But I know when I make a decision to buy something, I feel I feel it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm going to have that thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think it's hugely emotional.
I mean, this is why I use in the TED talk. It's why I use the teddy bear in my TED talk and the story, because it's old school. It's a classic school. And I just know it lands better. But I learned that working on tours, like when you just deliver cold, hard facts, dates, all the rest, whatever. But when you tell the story is one of those significant emotional connections to buying something. And when you master that, watch how people react. And that's why I included that segment in the TED talk in the TEDx talk specifically, it was the simplest example I could think of to quickly highlight in 2 minutes the emotional connection people will give and the perception of value shooting up purely because of an emotional attachment to a great story. You know, so I agree with 100% emotional values. I think people do get it, but I see I see there's opportunity to improve that with businesses that I work with. That's part of the sales training that we end up doing.
Yeah. And I suppose you're right. Like stories are emotive, but this is where you start thinking about making your buyers the heroes of your stories, you know, making them feel like giants, making them feel like heroes, making them, you know, I think it's hugely emotional.
Completely.
It's risky though, isn't it? Is it risky to start pulling at people's heartstrings? Do they get, you can get into trouble like that.
Why do you think risky? What's the context you're coming from? Why do you feel risky?
Because when things get emotional, you know, it's emotional. You know, it's like the line between love and hate is very thin. Do you know what I mean? They can go from loving you to hating you in a second. And I don't know, like very rarely you see brands kind of pulling on the heartstrings. Do you know what I mean? And if you get that wrong.
So here's what I'll say to that. It can be risky when done badly, is what I'm hearing. So let me give an example of what I mean. You know, there's businesses that might go to market tugging on a heartstring. They get lashback and pushback from market. And obviously we're doing this off the cuff. The example that's springing to mind for me was the Gillette when they did The Best a Man Can Get, and they had the whole advert campaign around, I think it was toxic masculinity, and the pushback on the brand was harsh.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that is because the perception was it was not authentic. Now, when you're describing risky and emotional, and you even said it before, like people buy stuff when they're in emotional states. This is why when I talk to emotional value, and it's about authentic connecting with people emotionally in a positive way. Yes, addressing the pains and challenges they've got, but also aligning with their visions and goals and what they want to achieve. But it's powerful storytelling. It's personalizing storytelling. It's personalizing the experience that you take them on. And an emotional bond and connection to me is paramount. I think absolutely more of the gold and success in sales lives in that element than the tangible one, for sure, alone. Like, I think it's one that is important, critically important to utilize throughout a process with somebody. And so when you say risky, I don't know where I get kind of what you mean by risky. I don't personally think it's risky. I think when done well, when done authentically, when done powerfully, it's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
The risk comes if, and I don't know if this is the right word, but if you're just saying something just to purely sell emotionally, but there's no truth to what you're saying, that to me, that's the risk. If there's no authenticity with the emotional journey you take people on, that's the thing you got to be mindful of.
Okay. And I think authenticity, and then I think like requirement. So there's like that, like the best a man can, you go from the best a man can get to toxic masculinity. There's no requirement for you to do that. Like, there's no requirement for you to be in any way critical of the people who buy your products and services. So so there's this whole virtue signaling woke thing, like M&M's did it, didn't they? Where they came out with a load of much more relatable M&Ms. Like, one of them now has comfortable shoes, one of them has anxiety. There's no requirement for that to happen. There's no necessity for that to happen. So I think it is kind of risky. And then what happens is everyone starts looking at M&M's business model and going, okay, well, you care about people having anxiety, but you don't care so much about child slaves in East Africa. It's like that, I think, is the danger and the risk. And I just think there's... Yep.
But I was while it's fresh, sorry, I want to cut you a bit. There's a friend in my circle, Latia Curry in the States. She wrote an article for Harvard Business Review. And I think the title of it, I've used it in some of my media pieces as a reference point, is how brands can align with the values they're selling. And it's this model of brand alignment with values to make sure that they are not just pushing, and you use the word, that virtue signaling theme, not jumping on the bandwagon because it's trending and topic. It's a beautiful little model. Latia Curry, Harvard Business Review, how brands can sell the values that they're aligning with. And I can send you a link, maybe. I'll definitely be able to send you a link to it, Martin. And It talks about, the best thing business can do is you jump on those themes when you actually epitomize them from the core of your business out and you're structurally sound to espouse them. So a great example is you can't really talk to equity and how equity and gender pay gaps and all the rest is an important topic when you've got a board of directors that is 12 middle-aged white men, right? That's not an alignment. That's not an alignment. If you're going to talk about this is really important, this theme is really important, we're espousing this theme. If you're not living it for yourself from the inside, sometimes the best thing you can do as a business is acknowledge where we're falling short. That's what I get from reading that article is, hey, this is an important theme. We're going to be doing better with it. This is who we see as doing really well, but not to be trying to seen as leading the charge. Does that make sense? So it's a beautiful article. I'll send you the link to it. Because the model she's got is fantastic.
It sounds fantastic. Please send me the link. And also, can we do another one of these in the future where we talk exclusively about storytelling? Because I think you're telling great stories. And I can't find someone decent to talk to about that.
I've got a whole program called Orator in my academy on storytelling, so of course we can. No problem.
Of course you have. Okay, cool. So the thing about this, I think, is that brands are weirdly, stupidly, unnecessarily getting political. And I don't know if this is exactly the right place to talk about it, but it's around trying to promote this emotional value. And I just think it's really dangerous. I think it's really unnecessary and risky because, you want to sell to the whole world. I did a stand-up comedy course, and one of the things that they told me was you don't do jokes about politics or gender because what happens immediately is you split the room. And if you get the split right, as long as you are, literally, this is what I was told, as long as you aren't upsetting the females, then it will be all right. You upset the females, nobody's allowed to laugh. Will Smith, there it is. Exactly that. Will Smith supposedly upset his wife and he wasn't allowed to laugh and then he had to assault somebody. It's exactly like that. Why are these brands doing it? I don't understand. I mean, I do understand it's because they're trying to leverage this emotional value.
Well, maybe, but also this to me also links into service value. So I'll give you an example, I think, of a business that does authentically as well. Again, that springs to mind. That would be Atlassian. Okay, so Atlassian, the founders there, like Cannon Brooks, they're massively getting behind the whole theme of climate change to the point where they make it very clear, we're going to pay all our staff. I'm just picking up what I read from reading the features guide. We're going to pay all our staff a full day's work, 2 days work, and they can go to these climate change events and march in favor. Plus they're funding and they're being very vocal about it. Now, so when you say, hey, do they need to be? I think there's a balance here because it's also important, and I would do it. It's important and okay if you have a firm belief to make a stand for something that you believe is important, it's aligned with your brand and you're willing to back it, go for it. But just make sure, I guess this is where some of those businesses have fallen short, is that they are not living those values and they're not structurally sound with those values. If I come back to Latia's model, which is why they might get lashback. But if you're living and breathing and espousing those values that you're selling and you're structurally sound with them, even if you do polarize some people, we can't please everybody. Not every customer on the planet is your customer. And so it's okay, provided you know that. And provided you're okay, you're making a stand and selling what you believe is the morally sound, authentic, best thing to do moving forward. I think that's okay. And that's where we see, does that make sense? That's where you see some businesses might get lashback. Others, hey, I'm sure, I don't read it closely, but I'm sure Atlassian might get pushback from some people because of how they do support that theme and topic when a lot of people still don't.
Okay, I don't think it's okay. I think it's dangerous because where we find ourselves in 2022 is there is a very, very noisy anti-climate change component to our society. There is a much less noisy anti-climate change component to our society. And these two ends of the spectrum are making a huge amount of noise.
Yeah.
The issue is that the majority of people, the silent majority, are all in the middle somewhere, having whatever their opinion is, but we don't ever get to know necessarily what that opinion is. So the danger is that if there are more people on the anti-climate side than the whatever way it goes, for addressing climate change, against addressing climate change, you don't go. So pandering to those noisy bunches on each end of the spectrum, I think is quite dangerous. And I think it would just be better if brands didn't get involved in issues. I think here's what I think would be better is if brands just really focused on delivering actual value. I think that would be much better.
This is important. Again, and it's good that we can have a different perspective to some point around this because I'm okay with brands doing that. I would certainly do it. I'll give you a real example from my world, I guess, is in Australia, when we had the vote, I forget how many years it is now, there was the vote about are we going to vote for gay marriage, for example?
Yeah.
Now, that was a hot topic at the time. And to me, and I often, I'm with you, I often don't get vocal around everything. I stay away from themes that, but there's times where I feel it's okay and it's important to some degree too. And I made it clear, I said, look, I didn't make a song and dance about it, but it's like, well, yeah, I will vote for this because I know there's many people in my world that this is important to them for, and I want them to have a life that they want. And so it was now I know I did that knowingly, and I suspect I probably had some business contacts that fell off my radar because they were in the opposite camp. But when I made that choice, I did so because I was okay with the choice I was making. Now, I've had a more recent example that I won't go into in too great detail, but it's a personal example, recent one, to do with the whole transgender issue as well, where literally that is now right in my world, right in my face. And it's not one that I can ignore. It's not one I can ignore. It's one of those topics and themes, because somebody who is absolutely in my inner circle is experiencing that firsthand. And so I have to make a voice. I have to be a voice in support of that for that reason. It's like weighing that up and going, okay, I will be that voice and I will support and encourage. And if I've got people in my world that don't like that, because that's our topic, I'm okay with that. So I'm kind of sharing back to you, I guess, about what's political, what's not. I think we can't take the business side out of it. At the end of the day, Martin, I'm a human being. I've got opinions around lots of things. I live my day in life. And to keep all of those separate from bringing them into work is probably not going to happen. So it's being more mindful that I'm voicing and supporting the things that I do believe firmly in, that, I think is the right thing. I think it's okay. And if we don't do it, if you say brands maybe don't do it, look at a brand or a business is lots of people making it. But at the end of the day, brands have personalities. Brands have identities. And brands, to some degree, and I'm sure you would see this, if they don't make a stand, they get lashback. If they aren't seen to be taking action, they get pushed back as well. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place in some degrees. So what you're saying, risky, stay away from it. I go, sometimes it's important they do, because they might be punished if they don't speak out, you know what I mean? Or make their position clear. Sometimes they're punished as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to people on as part of this who have what is considered quite an alternative view in 2022. They have, let's just call it that, an alternative view, and they are out in the world expressing their alternative view, and they are benefiting from that. They are attracting more. So I think there is value, I'm afraid, to standing up and saying, okay, these are my convictions. I think it's different if you are a small business, because you're right, you are a person, you are experiencing these things. And I think it's different than if you're a brand. I think where I'd prefer to be is where everything weren't so politicized, where I don't need the people who make me fat off of eating chocolate virtue signaling to me about the type of shoes that their characters in their marketing wear. Do you know? I mean, I don't need that. There's an emotional thing there, which is I feel better when I eat chocolate. And when I stop eating chocolate, I feel like shit again, and I want to eat chocolate some more. Do you know, that's like the way the emotion works. But I think, that's where I think. Okay, cool.
The stat, I'll just wrap this, we'll move on. But the stats also back up. I mean, when I write a lot for media, I'm pulling on sources, and the facts are there to back it up. We've got generations now where like over 70% of a young generation use the purpose and social causes that a business are supporting as part of their decision of who they're going to work for, as much, if not more, than the pay packet they get. Yeah. We've got buyers doing the same thing, that they will look at what you're doing socially, they'll look at what you're not doing socially, and they will buy or not buy from you. And so we're actually moving into this world, and the studies are coming out where to actually remain a neutral voice is no longer necessarily an option. That's the position. That's why I come from it. But I agree with you. It comes with some risk. That's why you got to be comfortable that what you're putting out, you genuinely feel we walk, we talk, we believe in, knowing that, you know what, some people are not going to like us, and be okay with that. It's sort of like as a leader, when you become a leader, the higher up you go in leadership, you're not going to please everybody. Stop trying. You can't please everybody. Do the right thing, morally sound as best you can. I think that's what it comes down to.
Okay, let's move on to safer ground.
Yeah. Yes.
Service. Everyone knows that the service has to deliver value.
Service value, absolutely. I mean, you can relate this in a business sense in its simplest form to quality service, right? I don't know about you, but even things like now, if I go to retail, does the person look me in the eyes, or are they doing something on their phone? Like, are they present with me as a customer? Like, just basic 101 back to service. But the service value model expands that to, is what you're doing, is your product, what problems does it address, and what solutions does it put in place. So it's like 4 dichotomies. What's the problems you're solving, and what are the quality of the solutions that you're putting in place? Have you considered both the possibilities and the consequence, if you like, and the possibilities of what you're going to put in place? You can't just, think about, if I relate now, if you're trying to push single-use plastic products massively now, you're probably going to struggle reality in this world for some markets. Not to say there isn't one, but you got to think long-term impact of the solutions you're coming up with now, not just short-term fix. Service impact to others, service impact to communities, and actually the environment is part of that. That came blatantly clear in talking to and going through the studies and research with people, is that impact more broadly than just me and my house and world is actually a consideration. So quality service, what problems are we solving, quality of solutions, impact of those solutions for long term, impact to others, communities, environment. This is all part of service value.
Okay. I think service is really important. I've been teaching digital marketing for about 15 years. I've run hundreds of AdWords campaigns. I've taught people AdWords for a day, and they've gone off and set up their own AdWords businesses. Something I'm really good at. But recently, I want to market this channel. So I thought, okay, I'll spend some money with Google. I got zero value. But that's okay, because what you do as a last resort is you phone them up and you say, this hasn't happened. How do I do this better? And they say, you have to spend more money. And then you fight with them and they tell you what you actually have to do. And it's, anyway, I phoned them and no, you can't do that anymore. You can't talk to Google because of COVID and for the safety of their team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole channel is closed to me, because that level of service isn't, that service where I get to talk to somebody about how do I actually do this right, isn't there. What's the point of that? The point of that is also Google are struggling now. They're starting to lay people off, etc. And it just seems to me that this service thing talks about the amount of respect that you have for your customer. Like if you don't make somebody available to talk to your customer, then here's the best example. For about 15 years, if I phone my bank, they'll play me a recorded message, which is essentially, we are experiencing unexpected levels of calls. Please be patient whilst we get somebody to talk to you. Now, they've not been expecting this level of call for 15 years, and these are data-driven businesses. They know exactly when the calls come, how many calls there are, how long they last, so they could resource this perfectly. But what that message says to me is we don't give a shit about you, and we don't give a shit about the people who are taking your calls, and we're going to leave you stewing there until you're in such a shitty mood that you can't possibly have a positive conversation with this person. That's what I think of when I think of service value.
And that's why I started with that, is quality service is absolutely part of this. That's exactly what you're describing. Yeah. Being present, being attentive, quality customer care, quality customer service, quality problem solving when that customer has a problem.
Yes.
Which ties, what's the problem? What's the solution, right? That pathway, that is all part of this. It's the overarching element is far bigger, but at a grand level in a business, absolutely. Quality service, customer care, journey you take them on. And we hear about this. This relates to the experience economy, that customer experience at every touch point from when they start with you all the way through. Absolutely paramount. To some degree, this is where I mentioned there's deeper bits I do work with in businesses. And I talked about VAEs, which I learnt working for Contiki. A VAE is a value added extra. It's something that you do because you can, right? It's something that's not included, if you like, in the contract, service, or package, but it's also the manner with which you might do something. And I took that concept from my touring days and built this out to what I call a playbook of VAEs. How do you do value-added extras as part of your service? And I talk about, and I share stories and concepts, but those are things like, what else can you do to save people time or quality time, compound the experience they have with the quality time that they have? Sometimes in a world of digital by default, we rush to automate everything. And the problem is we actually make the experience worse, to your point. By trying to automate and streamline and make it self-serve and efficient, we actually can detract from the quality of service by doing that. So how can we save time, compound quality time? How can we give people a sense of being upgraded? It doesn't have to cost us anything. The example I talk to there often is an airline seat. I can get upgraded to a business first class. It's the same variable costs, but the feeling I'm left with is gold, you know? How can I, crisis conversion. How can I personalize and do things for you alone? Personal touch, human effort stands out more in a digital age. And I'll give you another example of that in a moment. How can I give you extra services, extra knowledge, extra networks, extra education, extra training, extra people, just because I can? And this is why a lot of businesses we see, they run forums, not just for their in-house teams. A lot of my clients, I do keynotes and training programs for their clients as a value-added extra. They are giving their clients access to knowledge, education, connection, networks as part of that additional service. And absolutely philanthropy. You know, getting behind social causes that your clients love is a beautiful thing as well. You know, you see that pan out. So there's lots of mechanisms that we can apply to build out what I call this value-added extras piece as well. So service value, 100% agree. Quality service embedded throughout your business, every touch point. Additionally, how else can we really add a dynamic element to that through value-added extras to really make that service pop and shine? That's the sort of work I do in those fields with businesses to really bring service value to life.
Brilliant. Okay, and what do I think about that? See, what I want to do, so that's all the positive stuff. Thank you. I see brands just deciding that not that they're going to, you know, really invest in service. They're just not going to offer it at all. And you're right. Sometimes it fails. And for me, it's a big decider on whether, because there's a risk. Let me give you an example of where it's failing. I don't know if you are a McDonald's customer, but unfortunately I am, because I really like a McDonald's breakfast, and I shouldn't, but I do. So what they've done is they've replaced the counter staff with these computers, and they look beautiful, and you're like, they're huge screens, and you touch whatever you want, and you know, that's a great idea. They don't have to employ those people, they don't have to rely on those people. It's a great idea. It doesn't work, because what used to happen is you would queue up at the till and you would see all of the menu above the counters, above the, you know, the whole menu would be there. So all the time you're in the queue, you're thinking about what is it that I'm going to order. So when you get at the front of the queue, you know exactly what you're going to order. What's happening now is that people are browsing every category on this thing because they don't know what it is that they want to order. So it takes forever. So if you're queuing behind these people, you're basically never going to get a breakfast. So it does fail. And
I'm just getting my
cables.
Now carry on. I just noticed my cord dropped out. Carry on. I'm listening.
And
there we go.
What was the other thing I wanted to say? For me, it's about risk. It's about, I'm taking a chance in becoming a customer of your brand, probably because it's something I really need to see happen. You know, what happens if it goes wrong? You know, is there somebody on the end of a phone, or is somebody going to come visit me in my office to make sure this thing works or not? Because for me, right there, that's a showstopper. It doesn't, if it's the 10th good product, but they offer service, I'll go with that all day, every day, because there's too much risk involved. There's another, for instance, like I use one of these online bank services, and I was thinking about putting some more money there so I can have it in dollars, because the pound is going down the toilet. I don't know what's going to happen today that we've got King Charles III, but it is. So I was thinking about putting some money there, but I made a transfer at the weekend. It didn't work. And then yesterday I was trying to get in touch. I'd left it 3 days to make sure it really didn't work. And I was trying to get in touch, and the contact function on the app just doesn't work. It's like, okay, well, I'm glad I didn't put any more money here. Do you know what I mean? It's so I think it goes to risk. That's what I think it goes to.
There is a risk with it again, and I look at, and it's a great topic actually, because this talks to quite a bit of themes I'm doing with businesses at a keynote and training level. It's a balancing act again for businesses though, because on the flip side, you've got consumers that want that. They want the technology. They want to speed things up. They want the faster touch point. It's not just being driven by businesses going, let's just put tick in place because we want to take Steph out of the equation. They're actually responding to customer demands too, right? That's And think about experience from a consumer. If you have to stand in a line, there's a lot of people do not want to stand in any line. Where can I do it myself? You know,
Yes.
so this, and so businesses are having to do that. And so, I think this is a topic for me that I think is possibly one of the biggest topics of our time. And that is, how do we blend humanity with digital acceleration and transformation? How do we embed technology effectively in a business that makes it more efficient and streams it up without sacrificing the quality of service, personal touch, and feeling and impact that you're talking to? That's the challenge. That is the challenge of digital transformation. And so on a very practical level, there's businesses I work with. It's some of the work we might do is, don't rush to do tech by default. Why are you doing it? And then be very careful and conscious with the tech stacks that you're choosing and why. Don't rush to do it just because everybody is, think about, and then think about the impact of that too. How does this impact the way we consciously want to create that customer experience and customer journey? That's part of that. So it's a bit of a balancing act, so with the McDonald's stuff, I can see exactly why they do it. And also the audience, there's a generation. I don't know about you, but I watch a lot of documentaries on this stuff. I'm fascinated by it. And the more I watch, we've got a generation now of buyers, of people moving in that are buyers and next level consumers. They've grown up, all they've ever known is interaction with tech. And all they expect is a more interaction with tech. And this talks to this challenge of businesses having a blend. Let's do tech, but without losing the touch that Martin wants. It's like, we want to still make sure people like Martin still have that sense of, that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, of our time.
I think 100%. And, I get involved in talking to people about digital transformation and things. And what's interesting is the world is becoming increasingly digitized. I think too much. I think it would be better if younger generations did have more engagement with the actual world and people. That's what I think. It's controversial. But what I think
and I pick it up with papers. Like, there's lots of research that backs that up. So you make us agree with that.
Yeah,
for sure.
So it's interesting. It's really interesting. But I think brands can really get it wrong. And I think actually, I'm in your court. Anyone invests in bringing you in to work out how they can deliver more service. That's the business I want to do business with, rather than ones which are really evacuating the service space and saying, look, we can get away with not having these people on tills, so that's what we're going to do. I think that's disgusting. Let's go to my favorite.
Of course, go for it.
Okay, cool. Because I'm looking at the time. I know you've got to run because you've got too much on your plate. We got 20 minutes. Have we got 20 minutes?
20 to 25. We're all good.
Okay, super cool. Relationship. People buy stuff because they like the people they're buying from. What I didn't realize until I encountered you is that this was a thing. And I've done this my entire career. Like, literally 25 years I've been a relationship seller. I know you sold advertising for a very short period of time. That's where I started, was selling magazine advertising. We were on the phone. And the way it would work is that we would spend all week essentially marketing the fact that we had advertising available, and seeing if we could convince some of those people to take advertising. And then in the last 2 hours, we would go and sell it to our mates, like whatever was left. So we would have a chav list. This is before a chav was like a poor person. It was cheap advertising list. And these were people that we already had the relationship. And you find out, you say, hello, mate, how's it going? How's your week? Blah, blah, blah. I've got a quarter, a half, an eighth, or whatever. It's going to cost you. Do you know what I mean? It was already done. So it was that relationship. But everyone on our table had that chav list. Everyone had those people who were their mates. And they knew would buy this in a second just because they were their mates. And that has framed the way I've sold my entire life. The best customer relationships I've had, and the ones that don't even go on to be customer relationships, or where I don't manage to make friends with the people, are where they're my friends. Where they'll phone me and they'll swear at me and say, everything you do is shit. So I'll understand, do you know what I mean, that it's important and it needs to get fixed so it will go on. I've done relationship selling my whole life without realizing the significance of this as a value component.
Yeah. It's completely a value component. It's great that you do it. A lot of people I come across or find they do that. This just gives a conscious framework and effort to it, right?
Yeah.
To your point, I would say my business, easily over 90% of my business still is people that have worked with me before, many of them over many years. I've got people I've done work with in Australia since the first year I was in Australia. And it may not be every year, but 2 years, but they come back. And I think I called out earlier, often it's not even the same content. It maybe never even had the same content or same body, but we work together over and over and over again. And that's not just because of the quality of the impact of the content I roll. It's absolutely because of the relationships I build with those people. I put a focus on it, and I think where you can have that connection, not every phone call, not every contact, even with a business client, is about how can I upsell, how can I cross-sell, how can I sell? It's how can I add value? It's those personal touches. If I know it's somebody's birthday, just phone and wish them a happy birthday. If I know they've had a bad day, phone in and checking in with them. If I know they like an event or a sport, hey, I saw this was on, I thought of you. You might want to go. Here's a link to an event. Here's a link to a sporting event. Just remember, just showing that you actually care outside of, I want you to buy something or deal with me, just it's genuine, authentic, quality relationships of giving a shit about other people, not what you can get from them, but what you can do for them. Super important.
100%. And I maintain the best sales meetings that I've ever been involved in are where we will spend 50 minutes talking about their football team, their holidays, their families, their new car, their whatever. We talk shit about each other for 50 minutes. And in the last 10 minutes, it's like, okay, what needs to get done? And there's never an objection. There's never a discussion. There's never a negotiation. There's never a never. This is like, what needs to get done? What needs to happen? Those are the best.
They are. There's a balance with that though as well, Martin. You'll relate to this because this also layers back to those layers of human behavior. There are clients, I've got them. I'm sure you've had them, and people out there watching this in salespeople will definitely have them. There are some clients, so because of behavioral sciences, they don't want to start talking about their personal stuff, family and football with you on the first time they meet you. They want to get to business, right? And that's the balance. It's picking personality types and styles and preferences and building that relationship over time. Now, some people you will have that rapport and bond with quickly and build that relationship quicker. Others, you might take time to build it, but it will be built over time. But it's still quality relationship, quality effort, maintain a healthy, good relationship with that person that isn't just about what can I get from this and how can I sell.
100%. And the reason I'm laughing is because who cares what they want? I want to be your mate and I want to sell to you. Do you know what I mean? So right off the bat, I'm going to be like, my mission as a salesperson is to rattle your cage to the point where it's like, look, either we're going to be mates and you're going to buy this, or you're not. That's fine. You don't have to be my mate. You don't have to buy it. And I think that's also fine. But this relationship is like, I remember I was working in South Africa and I had a very Afrikaans customer, and he would phone me at 6 o'clock every day. He'd say, Martin, I was selling skills like guys, contractors. Come and get all your guys off my site. They're all shit. Do you know what I mean? And they'll be like, you know what? I'm going to come and get my guys off your site because you're shit. Do you know what I mean? And we'd have that fight like almost every day. But we could, because there was the relationship there, And I think, I say this, I train people to do telemarketing. And the first thing you have to ask people is, how are you? Because what you learn from that answer, you have to ask them and you have to care, exactly like you said before. But if they can't answer that question respectfully, you can't have a business relationship with those people. Do you know what I mean? It's just not possible. So that's like the very first qualification, which is how personable, how friendly is this person? Because if they can't tell you how they are, what's going to happen when the thing you're delivering doesn't go quite right and you've got an actual problem that you need to resolve? You're bang in trouble, I love this, that relationship is on this list, because it's what I've done my whole career without actually knowing.
And part of that, again, if I expand on the model, this was the Aristotelian framework was the 5 elements and 4 causes. So that's another Aristotelian thinking of causes. Yeah. Right? That's why 5 elements, 4 causes for each. And relationship value was actually the trickiest one to articulate the 4, because the way people describe what's quality relationship was more varied. With tangible value, it was easy. It's the measurable stuff, dollars, percentages, numbers, and time. With the emotional, it was through sensory engagement, story, innovation. Right? So all the others were a lot easier and a lot more succinct to identify. Relationship one, because people's perception of what makes a great relationship, like you ask people, well, what makes an amazing relationship? The descriptive words that come back was more broad and wide. And that's why, again, I'll repeat the nursery rhyme for this one. For relationship ace traits, choose your own if you must, but be candid and brave with two common languages, kindness and love, because quality character and value fit together like two hands in gloves. So yeah, you can choose your own and what makes a great relationship value, but what became blatantly clear is candid conversations, transparency. And that means also healthy relationships. And I train this out with sales teams. You know, there's that old line, the customer's always right. I've got an updated version of that because I think that's out of date. A customer's not necessarily always right. They're right in their world, but what is right or wrong? Anyway, I think a customer's opinion is always to be respected. It's not about right or wrong. I could have a different perspective. And as an expert in my field with a strong opinion or perspective or data, I might have a completely contrasting opinion to yours, and that's okay. And we can have a healthy discussion. Sometimes being candid is actually when I've got clients that want to do something, let's say content, and I'll be the one strongly suggesting we go a different path, and here's why. Because I want to be candid and transparent and I think this is going to land far better than what you're going. And they'll listen if you've got that relationship. So it's candid conversations, trust within that conversation, authenticity. And you in that rhyme there, the two common languages. Here's where that comes from. We live on a planet with, at the time I wrote and did the research, over 7,000 known languages. Half the world speak the top 10 languages. And none of those as common languages that every human being understands, because the common languages all of us understand, we don't even need to speak a word. Kindness and love. When you act with kindness, when you do things passionately, when you do things with love, and that comes through in the actions. And so that's why am I doing this for somebody with great intent? Am I doing this generously for them? That without words can come across so powerfully, So relationship value to me, I think it's absolutely gold. It's why my favorite TED talk as well. Watch that TED talk. Robert Waldinger, TED talk. It's amazing. 12 minutes. He's a professor from Harvard. Cool TED talk. 12 minutes. Super cool.
Okay. Brilliant. And I think it doesn't even need to be an amazing relationship. No. A relationship is really useful. And all that's about for me is being interested, is a bit of a theme that's run through. That being actually interested. I am actually interested because I'm nosy. I really am. I'll ask you how you are. I'm really interested to know. And being faithful and reliable. Do you know what I mean? I'm interested, I'm faithful, I'm reliable. That's the cornerstone of the relationship, and from where it goes from there is where it goes from there. Right. Yeah. We haven't spoken about personal, but I think that ties in with emotional and service and relationship. And we're running out of time. So do you want the good news?
Yeah, go for it.
I think you're qualified to talk to us about value. So we haven't got even to question 2, which is who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? But you've given us a sense of that. Very quickly, what's your recommend? Yep.
That one quickly. So I work both public and corporate arenas, but mostly my work is with businesses, and I now work across multiple industries. I started out with, like you, media, advertising, telcos, and then it's extrapolated. Property, real estate, banking, insurance, financial services, tech, IT, healthcare, aged care, not-for-profit, the list goes on, because the content is relevant irrespective of the industry. Retail, right? The content's relevant irrespective of the industry. It's the content that helps businesses transform from the inside out. That's essentially what I do. And a lot of my work is with business. I'd say half of my work is keynote at conferences, half is deep dive training programs to help really embed philosophies that makes transformational change happen.
Super cool. Excellent. So that's question number 2 taken care of. Question number 3, if you can do this in a minute or two, because then we can chop it and put it on TikTok and Instagram Reels and Shorts and those places. What's your recommendation for people who want to get better at adding value?
Yeah, I would say ask yourself 5 simple questions to do with the 5 elements. How can I make a measured impact to this person's world? And what would that measured impact be? Maya Angelou said it well. People, for emotional value, people forget what you said, forget what you did, but they don't forget how you make them feel. How am I going to make you feel when you've left our interaction day? What am I doing to make that a positive interaction that you go, wow? Service value. What am I doing today that adds service quality to people around me and my community and the broader world? What am I doing to make an impact there? Relationship. How am I giving first? How am I offering to, what can I do for you? There's a quote that goes, and it was from Ogmandino, I think it was. Imagine today, everybody you're going to meet will be dead before midnight. And because the reason for that is it makes you think about how would you treat that person? Your life will change differently. When you're going, people have got battles we don't even know about. So how can I be here, present, be of service, and add value for this person to make their day better? And it's about them, not about me. Personal value. I know we didn't touch it, but I do want to cover it because to me, this underpins the rest. I often say jokingly, nobody on the planet except 2 people are fantastic at everything because we can all improve. And those 2 people, it doesn't matter who they are. They're 2 public figures that claim to be fantastic at everything, right? Nobody's great at everything. Nobody. So personal value is, what are my gifts? How can I add value through my natural strengths and gifts? Where are my weaknesses? How can I improve those or collaborate with people to help me deliver on those better? That's personal value in a nutshell. If we ask ourselves questions around these things, that's how we add value. Just consciously thinking about it. How can I make an impact? Measured, emotional, better service, quality relationship, personal impact.
Genius.
Ask yourself better.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, good. So, what should people read?
Well, people should read. Let me think. I've got a list of books, my favorite, and they're short ones. Some of them. I love As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I think it was written 1904. It's tiny. It's a tiny book. And I just let that open and read segments from that throughout. I love books by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi on flow theory.
Yes.
And flow, right? So Mihai's work, I'm a really big fan of that sort of work, which, I love reading. I love Shakti Gawain, Creative Visualization. I've got some old school books. That really is short sections on your headspace and visualization of the world you want to create, but I love it. And there's definitely methods in that I've found work. And you hear about this stuff happening in sport and all sorts of things as well. So Shakti Gawain, greatest salesman in the world, Ogmandino, right? Just saying there, greatest salesman in the world. Beautiful. Richest Man in Babylon. These are old school books by George S. Clason. Richest Man in Babylon, George S. Clason, greatest salesman in the world, Ogmandino. As a Man Thinketh, James Allen, Creative Visualization, Shakti Gawain, anything by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. There's this book called Add Value by Mark Carter. You might want to have a squiz at as well, just quietly. Had to drop that in, right, if we're talking about value. Jack Welch as well, Winning by Jack Welch. I love that book. In fact, there's a chapter in that book called The Biggest Dirty Little Secret in Business. And it leapt off the page to me because it's one of the elements of relationship value, right? What Jack Welch talks about, the biggest dirty secret in business is a lack of candor, a lack of transparency. And it's in both my books. And my first book, Candor's in the Value Model. So when I read that book and got that chapter especially, I love that. That was a great book as well. So I can give you a broader list. I'm always reading, lots.
That's plenty. That really is plenty. Thank you so much. Okay, good. Which brings us then to the last question. But before I ask the last question, I have to check in. How are you feeling about your experience of appearing on the Talk Marketing show?
It's good, man. I know we connected through that refer and recommendation in. And as I said to you, I think what's nice about this is just the freewheeling conversation. You can tell we've got an idea where we're going, but it's not structured. You're not hiding, which allows for vulnerability and transparency. And I've loved the experience. Yeah, the candor, right? And I love that because there's been a couple of times where we've got different perspectives around the same things to some degree. And that's cool. That's healthy. That's
Yes.
healthy. So that's what I love about this is that free, vulnerable, candid conversation is not about a contrived nature. So that's kind of cool. So hats off to you.
Fantastic. Good. The reason I asked that question is because now I'm going to demand that you throw a couple of people under the bus to have a conversation like this with me. So what works best is if it's people you can actually introduce me to and you can set up like a LinkedIn connection, something. Have you got a couple of people for us, Mark?
Dude, so I'll share the ones that instantly spring to mind because they're on my radar. They're in my circle. I've got a mastermind crew of leaders in my circle.
Okay.
So I'll give you a couple of names from some of that circle. Chris Hall would be the first one that springs to mind. He's an interesting dude. He's actually my connection that opened up. He was pivotal in making the TEDx event happen, and he connected with the TED license holders for that, and then I ended up that, and Chris and I got on. He's come from a startup innovation background. He works across innovation startups and a whole lot, and he's a super cool, chilled guy, very thoughtful. So Chris Hall.
Excellent.
An innovation crowd with City of Casey and so much more. He'd be one. Mike Mindstrong springs to mind of retail compliance because the way his brain works is really quite cool and out there, and you'll have no problems having a conversation with him. He will give you lots to anchor on. And because he works heavily in retail, some great ideas I think that will resonate well with you and for your audience. Ryan Jenkins is a core one in there. I've known Ryan for years. Ryan sat in on training I did when he first became a manager with Census a long time ago, and we've stayed in touch. And since then, he's set up and founded a couple of businesses. But he's a co-founder with a digital marketing business, the Hype Society, and his background is sales and marketing. And so, yeah, I'm sure you'd have a robust conversation with him as well. So that's three. There's a bunch of others, but that's the first three that spring to mind. Chris Hall, okay, cool. Mike Mindstrong, Ryan Jenkins.
Well, save some for the future because I'm coming back to extract everything you know about stories at some point in the future. So that would be really good.
We can do that.
You are an absolute legend. I was expecting to, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. What we'll do now is we will say goodbye for the benefit of the audience, for anyone who's still listening, and then I'll press the stop button and we'll say goodbye like normal human beings. Mark, this has been an incredible chat about something that I think is incredibly interesting and useful and neglected. Nobody's talking about this stuff. So I take my hat off to you, man. You're doing a brilliant job talking about something really important. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. I've really loved the banter, sir. Thank you.
You are very welcome.